Over the years, I worked on many of Brian's guitars, but this guitar, Smoke, I've worked on 5 times as much as all the rest. It's been to 4 of my shops. I've moved several times. It's been in my shop a lot. I've sweat over this thing. I bled over it. My DNA is all over this thing, and my heart and soul. At the time, Brian's tech Rich brought the guitar in, probably '97, and on the case was a tape that said "Smokin'." And I said, "What does that mean?" He says, "This guitar smokes, man." So the first year or two, it was called Smokin', and it evolved because I looked through my journal notes, and a few years later, maybe '99, 2000, it was called Smoke. So now it's Smoke.
Okay, and here we have what I call this pride and joy all the time. This is Smoke, the 1959 6120. Now the color is just incredible. Orange 533, I believe, is the color, but I could be mistaken. This is year 13 with Brian, so Smoke's been here the whole time with me and never broken a string. I've had maybe 1 or 2 small issues with the guitar when he was playing it live. The master volume went one night, and I'm going to fix it the next day, which is also, always fun to work on these, guitars from the 50s. Basically daily, it's tuning, some intonating, trying to get the old guy as close as I possibly can to, show quality sound. Brian doesn't change strings a lot anymore. He likes old strings, so I don't do a lot of string changing anymore, only when absolutely necessary. A few years ago, we were doing the Montreal Jazz Fest, and the guitar had been sitting for 6 months, and the string sounded really, really dead. And I brought it to him in the dressing room, and he kind of got upset that the fact basically the gear came to the venue very late, and I didn't want to take the chance in changing the strings and having him make a maneuver that would be different than my stretch technique. So, to stay off of nationwide television, I decided to leave the strings where they were. I gave it to him in the dressing room, and he didn't like how it sounded sonically to his ear, just playing it acoustically in the dressing room. He played it throughout the whole show. It stayed in tune the whole show of that Montreal Jazz Fest. I forget what year it was. I want to say it was 2009 or 10. And after the show, he asked me, "Ty, what did you do to the guitar?" And I said, "Absolutely nothing." He said, "Don't change strings ever again unless you really have to." So I don't. So basically, it's really just tuning and making sure in different climates that the guitars stay in a somewhat of a controlled environment throughout the day. The guitar stays close to 100% in tune. He could play this guitar the whole show. It's so worn in and perfect that it comes back to me, at minimum 98%.
When I received the guitar, it had Imperial tuners, Grover Imperials. I removed them and I saw 12 holes. Somebody re-drilled new holes next to the other holes. It looked horrible. So I thought, I'm going to have to figure something out. So I called Duke Kramer, he worked for Gretsch since the mid-30s, I believe. He was selling Gretsch parts, old Gretsch parts, and he had a faceplate from the 50s, a rectangular faceplate. So what I did is I removed the original faceplate and made a template, which I brought with me today. I found it. I made this template from the shape of the original headstock and then brought it down in size, roughly, I guess it's about 1/16 of an inch, the thickness of the binding. And then drilled these 2 holes and matched them to the guitar with dowels so it wouldn't slip, and I routed a channel for the binding. Glued the face cap on, and at the same time I was able to get rid of the 0 fret, which is really important to Brian for staying in tune. And so the good part about it is it hid the 0 fret and at the same time lowered the logo a little lower into the headstock, and that's why it sits lower. What I do to all of Brian's fretboards is when I refret a conical radius, and another name for it would be compound radius. Basically, it's a taper, and it can't be the same radius all the way down because it tapers outward like a cone. It's a natural progression in the refretting process. So I start out around 9.5 or 10 degrees or radius, and I figure the bridge is around 12 degrees, so anywhere between 9.5 to let's say 12. And then the good thing about the bridge we're using, each string is able to have its own height, so I can easily adjust it. And the whole reason for this is so the guitar plays evenly all the way up the neck. Having a higher action with some players, they tend to get under the string easier. It's a little looser. You can loosen the truss rod and gives you a little dip. That gives you a lot more flexibility. But then again, it'll play a little sharp because you're pressing the string in the middle, let's say, to a further destination and sharpening. I've always liked lower action with a slight dip, and that way you can just play all the way up the board. But it depends on what kind of player you are. So apparently Brian just probably likes to get under the string. I never talked to him about it. But he's always told me, he's always raised up the thumb screws after he gets the guitar back from me.
I don't know, and Brian and I definitely have, Brian hears everything. His sound is, comes from, what he has in his heart, I guess, for sound. And to me, he hears all the little differences. I've played in a lot of hard rock bands when I was younger, so my hearing isn't, like his hearing. So, he can hear anything that's going on in terms of instrument to amp. If there's a vacuum tube that's starting to get a little bit lower than it should be, or it's, his hearing is just incredible. With
Brian's pickups, I found the pickup that had more power, because they're not always exact. One might be slightly lower. I always put that one in the neck position, so a lot of times I switch them around. With the bridge pickup, I recharge the magnet, because over time they stabilize, and a weaker stabilized magnet tends to be a little softer on the highs. So this guitar barks a little more because of the extra power in the bridge. Just slightly. It's all subtleness,
We used to have security just watch this guitar. We'd have a higher security guard for like an all-day watch. So, beautiful instrument.
I love the color. What a great faded orange. It's light. Quirkiness about it. The placement of the knob. Perhaps this hole was drilled on a Monday or a Friday at the factory. The feel of the neck is great on this guitar. And for some reason, it has a lot of energy. A lot of energy. I've always noticed it about this guitar, so that's probably why they named it Smoke, or Smokin'.